Before we start, I just want to say to everybody that I'm sorry that we find ourselves in this situation. I know that there's a lot of people at the moment who are really struggling, worried about what life's going to look like for them over the next few months. And all I would say is a lot of us are kind of in a similar situation. So I'm going to go through what the help that is available to you. This is an interactive session, so if I don't cover anything that you'd like me to cover, please do put a question in the Q&A. I'm going to stop at certain points as we go through and answer your questions as best I can. Just a disclaimer at the beginning, Lifetise is not a financial advisor, so we cannot provide financial advice. We can't talk about investments or pensions. This webinar is really just for me to walk through what we've learned about the government support that is available to you and the various schemes that have been set up. I'm going to walk you through it in a way that I hope makes a lot of sense. But as I say, if there's anything at all that comes up for you, any questions about your personal situation, stick them in the Q&A and I'll cover them at different points. Just before we start, I just want to explain a little bit about who I am and what Lifetise is. So we're a financial technology or a fintech company. We basically, in the good times, help people plan how to afford their life goals. So things like buying a home, starting a family, things that you might need to think about planning for in your financial lives. And our mission is very much all about helping people be more financially secure, to be able to kind of weather life's ups and downs. I will confess that when we were building it, pandemic wasn't at the top of our list of things that we should help people plan for. But now that we are in this situation, we've decided to focus most of our efforts on how can we help people make sense of their money whilst we're going through this crisis. So we're here to support you. We've got a ton of information on our site, which I'll put links to at the end. And as I say, any questions that come up, please do ask them because there's bound to be other people in a similar situation to you. Okay, now I've deliberately structured this in a particular way, so there may be bits of it that apply to you further down, but please stay with me as we go. And there's a reason that I've done it this way. So we're going to start with what help is available to you if you're a sole trader or if you're a partner in a partnership. If you are in a limited company, we'll get to you in a little while. If you're trading as a contractor under an umbrella company or through an agency, I'll cover that off as well in a little while. So the reason I'm starting with sole traders and those who are in partnerships is because the government's new scheme directed at the self-employed is specifically covering those groups of people. And it's called the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, or SIS. And it's probably the thing that you've heard about if you've been following the news. They kind of announced it with a big bang. And what it is that it gives you a grant, so not a loan, but a grant of 80% of your average monthly profits over the last 3 years. And that's up to a maximum of £2,500 a month for 3 months. Now, okay, let's break this down a little bit. So it's a grant, not a loan, which means that you don't have to pay it back. That's quite important for most of us who are struggling at the moment. And that 80% of your average monthly profits, okay, what are we talking about when we say profits? We're not talking revenue, we're talking about the profits that are left over once you've paid for your expenses. So whenever you will have submitted your tax year accounts for 2018-19, you will have submitted and you will have come out with an amount which is your profit for that tax year. And that's what we're talking about. And the way that it's going to be calculated is, it's a little bit unusual. They basically said, okay, we're going to go back 3 years from all of the tax that has been filed. And so we're going to look at tax returns from 2018 to 19. Then we're going to go back a year before that and look at 2017 and 18. And we're going to go back a year before that if you were trading then and look at 2016 to 17. And then they'll add up all of that profit and divide it by 3. Now, if you've only been trading, say, for 2 years, you've only got 2 years worth of tax returns, then they're just going to look at both of those years, calculate the amount of profit that you did over both of those years, and divide that by 2. Similarly, if you've only been trading for the 2018 to 2019 tax year, they'll just look at that one in isolation. Now, somebody asked me a question this morning, which was about how her business had started off slowly and had grown over the last few years. So when she looks at her last year's trading, so the 2018-19, it's much, much higher than she'd had, say, in 2016 to 2017. And she said that if you take the average across the 3 years, it's much, much lower than effectively the rate that she's making now through the business. And I think that's going to be an issue for quite a few of us, because the government has said so far, and remember the guidance is changing all the time, but they have said that they are going to do that 3-year look back. If you've got 3 years worth of trading, then they're going to do that 3-year look back, and they are going to average it over those 3 years. So if you happen to have had a better year last year, that will obviously lift up your average, but they're not going to do it just based on that single year, unless that's all that you've got to show in terms of accounts. So if you're looking at how much am I going to get, you really do have to do that 3-year look back and then add them all together, divide by 3, or do the 2-year look back and add that together and divide by 2. You're not able to cherry pick your best year, unfortunately, and use that as the baseline. So that's kind of one thing. And then the second thing to note about this is that it's paid in a lump sum in June. So you're going to get all of it together. Now, June for a lot of people is probably, given that we still haven't left March yet, is probably feeling like an age away. And you're probably wondering, how on earth am I going to even cope until we get to June? I'm going to come on to that in a little while. I'm going to say, don't panic for now. I'll explain what you can do. There are ways in which you can get money in quicker or keep hold of money that you already have. Okay, so who's eligible for this? All right, so the criteria are you have to be a sole trader or you have to be a partner in a partnership. Unfortunately, if you run your business through a limited company, this scheme isn't open to you. And I know that there's a ton of people who do run their business through a limited company, and they may be the sole director of that company. And there are many good reasons, tax reasons, insurance reasons, etc., that you choose to do that. Unfortunately, the government has, in creating this scheme, has had to draw boundaries around it, and those boundaries are arbitrary, right? They've looked at it and they said, okay, where are we going to draw the lines? And what that does mean is that if you are running your business through a company, this scheme is not going to work for you. And I'm really sorry about that, because I and a lot of other people are in the same boat. So I really do understand. You are eligible. So if you're a sole trader or your partner in a partnership, you then also need to pass these additional criteria. And they are that your profits in that last tax year, so the one that's recently filed, the 2018 to 2019, have to be less than 50 grand a year. So if you were making more than £50,000 in profit in 2018-19, you may not be eligible. Then you look back and you do that same 3-year average calculation that you're going to do for how much you get paid. And you're going to say, okay, so maybe in 2018-19, my profits were more than 50K. So then I'm going to take the average of my profits from 2016 tax year to the 2018-19 tax year. And again, I'm going to look at those and I'm going to add them all together and I'm going to divide them by 3. And if that average is under 50,000, then you're okay. You can apply for the scheme. So the 50,000 threshold is either for the last tax year or for that average over the 3. And it has to come below that 50,000 threshold. Then you look at, so many steps, right? Are you sole trader? Are you a partner? Are those profits under 50,000 a year? Okay, and then you look at those profits, you look at what that means in terms of how much you've earned from that. And you have to look at it and say, does that amount equate to 50% or more of my personal income? So basically what the government is saying is this has to be your main business. This can't be just your side hustle. You can't be claiming this on top of already having a big salary elsewhere. So they're really looking at just including people for whom this is their main business and that business earns them under 50,000 a year, but that is more than 50% of their income. So you have to go through all of those tests. And then you have to also be trading. So you can't have already closed your business permanently. Now, if your business is on hold, that's okay. A lot of businesses are on hold. But you have to either be trading in this current year and planning to continue trading. Again, these grants are supposed to be something that tides you over until you can pick your business back up. That's what they're designed for. Now, some of you might be freaking out because you didn't meet the self-assessment deadline in January. That's okay. If you didn't file your tax return in January, you still have time to do it. You have until the 23rd of April, so approximately another 4 weeks to get it in, so that you can show that how much you've earned, how much your profits were. You can show that it's more than 50% of your income. You've got until the 23rd of April. Now, friends of ours, another fintech company called Untitled, they have an app which automates your self-assessment process. They do it very, very quickly. It pulls in all of the data from your bank accounts, so it massively speeds up the process. Right now, they're offering that for free for the next 3 months. So if that's something that could help you hit that deadline, then please look at untied.io and you can just sign up, and it's very, very self-explanatory. And that should help you get there a little bit quicker in terms of filing that self-assessment deadline. Okay, the bad news, I've already touched on this a bit. You can't get it if you operate through a limited company. I'm sorry. You do have to wait until June to get it paid. Like I say, there's going to be a few things that you can do in the meantime, which I'll go through and explain if you need money now. I know a lot of us need money now. And then equally, there's going to be some other people who just fall between the gaps in this scheme. It's far from a perfect scheme, and I'm really sorry if you do fall through these gaps. If you've only recently set up your business and you don't have a full year of trading and accounts, then unfortunately you don't qualify. I know that there are plenty of people lobbying the government to try to bring the tax period further along. I mean, given that we are very close to kind of at the end of another tax year, I don't know whether that will change. But right now you have to be able to show accounts in 2018-19. There's another scenario as well that, for example, say in 2018, 2019 was your first year of trading and actually you only traded for 6 months of that year. They're not going to prorata the amount that you get. They're only going to look at what you actually filed and what you actually made in profits. So in that 6 months, they're only going to look at that 6 months worth of profit. They're not going to multiply that by 2 and say, okay, that's what you would have made. They're only going to look at actual profit, not projected, not prorated. So those are kind of the main ones where you fall out of the scheme. If you're through a limited company, if you don't have that full year of trading, it is very difficult for you. Okay, how does it actually work in practice? So you can't do anything right now. You can try calling HMRC, their lines are insanely busy, but they're not going to be able to tell you anything. And the main reason for that is because this is brand new. They're busy kind of coding it up. They're busy trying to work out actually how to do it. So they obviously have the rules that apply, but they don't have all the systems in place. So that's why we're looking at June probably for when these payments will start coming through. Hopefully it could be earlier, but we've got to assume June is when we'll start seeing the payments. So how it works is HMRC has all of your self-assessment details, and so they're able to look and see who's eligible. So they will contact you if you're eligible. You can't apply directly yet, so there's nothing really you can do except work out in terms of your own calculations. Are you eligible? How much do you think that you'll get? And actually we're working on a web page that will actually walk you through all of this in a series of questions and help you with the calculations. So we hope that that will be up very soon for you. So once the system is ready, you'll be sent a link on how to apply, and that will come via gov.uk. I did want to make a point at the moment that even though we're going through a horrible crisis, it doesn't seem as though the scammers and the phishers are taking any time off. So be very careful if you get anything through that looks like it comes from HMRC or from the government. Please do just double check that it is legitimate and that it's not somebody trying to scam you. I think we're going to see quite a few of these type of things. So anything that asks you for your bank details, for example, just be extra careful. You won't see anything for at least the next few weeks because HMRC just won't be ready to send stuff out. So if you do get anything before then, probably just double check it or report it. Okay, so that's the SIS scheme. And hopefully for at least some of you on this webinar, that will apply and you will be able to get that lump sum in June. But I know that June feels very far away. So let's go through how else can you get money in to tide you over whilst you're waiting. Tax payments are able to be deferred. Now, I appreciate this isn't as good as getting the grant because the grant is effectively money that you don't have to repay, whereas if you defer your tax payments, they're still there. You still have to find the money at some point, even if it's just a later date. But if you are struggling for cash flow right now, then this could be an option, particularly if you are going to get the self-employed income support in June. This is just a way for you to keep some money in the business now, keep some money if you need to pay yourself, if you need to pay rent, mortgage, food, etc. And then when that grant comes in, you can pay your tax using that. So this really is for anybody who has a VAT payment coming up in June. So your March to June payment, you can defer that until March 2021. You still have to file your tax return, so you can't just totally ignore it, but you don't have to tell HMRC that you're deferring, you just don't make that payment. So there's no extra steps that you take, you just file your VAT return, it will still show the amount of VAT that's payable, you just don't need to pay it. So if you have your VAT set up on a direct debit, for example, you'd need to cancel the direct debit. But if you normally just make payment via your bank account or some other way, then you don't have to do anything extra with HMRC, just don't pay it. Similarly, if you have a prepayment on your July self-assessment tax, so the one that you always have to pay in advance, the one that always makes us all feel really quite cross, you can also defer that until January next year. So you would effectively pay it with your first payment of next year's one. So again, for anybody who has been putting aside their tax payment over the last however long, and you've got that money sitting somewhere, you can put it to work in the interim if you need it. Again, I know it's not perfect because you're still going to have to then find that money when the time comes to pay. But I'm hoping that HMRC and the government will be very sympathetic to people who are in this situation and maybe let people pay either a lower amount or in installments when we get to that point. Again, these are really cash flow things. So if you're struggling now, these would be ways for you to either keep money in the business or pay yourself something. The other thing that is available to you, and this applies whether you're a sole trader, partnership, limited company as well, as long as you do your banking through a business bank account, i.e. not through your personal account, then you could be eligible for a business interruption loan. Now, again, these are specific government-backed loans that have been created in response to the crisis to try to get money into the hands of businesses who need it for cash flow. Again, it's been set up with the idea of just kind of tiding you over with your business so that you can keep trading now, or when things pick up, hopefully in 3 to 6 months time, your business will still be there, you can pick it up, you'll be fine. Okay, what are these loans? They're called loans, but actually they're different types of financing. So it can cover a standard type of loan, it can cover an overdraft facility, it can be asset finance, it can be invoice finance. So different providers are offering different things. You can get up to 5 million repayable over 3 to 6 years. So if it's loan or overdraft, I believe it's up to 6 years. If it's asset finance or invoice finance, then it's over a 3-year maximum term. And obviously, different lenders will be offering different things, but they're kind of the upper limits. It's available to any business. I'll just caveat that. Businesses who are turning over up to 45 million. So as long as your business makes less than 45 million, then you are eligible. Again, it has gaps. You still have to be a viable business. Now, in the current climate, it's difficult to know what is a viable business, but they're talking about businesses that would be viable if it weren't for this crisis. If your business was already in trouble before coronavirus hit, or if you're a loss-making business, or if you're a business that has never had any revenue, so that's going to include a lot of startups, then unfortunately, you're probably unlikely to get one of these loans, because even though they're government backed, they're still being provided by commercial lenders. So there is still eligibility criteria. You still have to go through that box ticking exercise, and they're going to still be scoring your business on, does it look like a business that's going to be able to repay this loan over time? So I'm sorry, Lifetise is a startup, right? We're in a similar position. We would not be eligible for one of these loans. We would have to try and find financing elsewhere. There's going to be quite a few businesses, I think, who probably won't be able to get one of these loans, but it's definitely worth talking to the various lenders and seeing if you come anywhere close to meeting their criteria. I have heard that it's a mixed bag in terms of the lenders. Some of them are being very helpful, some of them slightly less so. I think a few of them are trying to push people towards their standard commercial loans. In some cases, that might be a good bet for you. In a lot of cases, it's not going to be. So when you're thinking about this, and I'm sorry, it is an extra layer in terms of how you think about it, but you need to be thinking about, who am I borrowing from? What's the rate? How quickly do I think I'm going to be able to repay it? So when is that interest rate actually going to bite on me? And what does that mean in terms of forecasting my cash flow for the next few years and picking up kind of client work and everything else? There are 40 lenders offering different types of financing. So if you go onto the britishbusinessbank.co.uk website, it lists out all of the lenders. You can filter it by the different types of financing that's offered, and then you can get in touch with them and find out what they're offering. The government can pay the first 12 months interest or fees. So when you apply to the lender, you just need to tell them that that's what you would like to happen. In terms of security, so this was something that kind of got batted back and forth, and generally I think a lot of the lenders have agreed that if you're borrowing up to 250,000, then they won't ask you for a personal guarantee. Now, that may not be across all lenders, so please do double check when you get in touch what their terms are. Above that, they are going to want security. In the same way that they would for any commercial loan. And the noises that I've been hearing are that they won't necessarily take any personal guarantees on things like your home. For example, it would need to be against commercial premises, it would need to be against other assets that you have, or creditors. So like I say, if you're thinking of doing this, look very carefully at who you approach. In some cases, you're going to be better off going through your own bank if they are one of the lenders that's making this available, because they know you've got credit history with them. In some cases, you're going to be better off going with somebody who offers something very specific that you need, and always do check the terms. Some of the lenders are, for example, not charging you any arrangement fees on the way in and are waiving any early repayment fees. So if you think that this is literally a temporary blip in your business, and that once things go back to normality, that you're going to be able to pick things up very, very quickly, then you're going to want to make sure that you're not tied into a loan that's over multiple years that means that you can't get out of it. So just think carefully about that. I'm going to pause here and just see if there are any questions on this. Okay, sorry, I've got one question. Question about SIS. Second. Okay, the question was about SIS and what happens, and effectively what happens if you pay yourself through, if you are self-employed but you pay yourself through PAYE, are you or are you not eligible? Unfortunately not. You are not eligible if you pay yourself through PAYE or dividends. Equally, if you started your business in the last year, so if your first tax return is effectively 2019 to 2020, then as of right now, unfortunately, you are not eligible. That may change if enough of us lobby the government to extend it to cover people who effectively submitted their first things now. But no, if you've only been trading very recently, then even if it's over 6 months, you're not going to be included as of right now. What I would suggest is that if you are in that situation, find the business organizations that are representing self-employed people and lobby them, and also lobby your local MP to see if they can speak on your behalf. But yeah, they've created these kind of cutoffs for people. And like I say, it is arbitrary. They've done it based on what records do we have? What can we prove? What do we already know about people? How can we make it as relatively easy as possible for us to administer this scheme without people having to put in a load more paperwork that then has to be reviewed by HMRC? So they've just created this cutoff point at the 2018/19 tax year. And that's the first one that's going to apply, I'm afraid. Okay, if there's no other questions on the business interruption loan, we'll carry on. Obviously, there are still standard credit that's available potentially, but of course it's going to be much harder for you to get it if your business is struggling. One other thing that I should say about the SIS scheme is you can continue to work. So you don't have to close your business down to get access to the grant. You're allowed to continue working. It's a bit weird, right? So for those people who unfortunately are cut out of the scheme, there are also those who could potentially profit from it, because there are businesses who are doing okay, but they're also going to be able to apply for this grant. So like I say, it's far from perfect. I would hope that people whose businesses are doing great, unless they're struggling to pay their employees, are not going to then take advantage of the scheme by applying for additional grants, but it's possible. So as I say, if you are in the situation where you fall between the gaps, there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who are in the same boat. Find the organizations that are lobbying, and hopefully the government, once, even if it's once the first tranche of this has been worked out, will be willing to extend it, but we just simply don't know if they will yet. Okay. So if you're in the situation where effectively you're stuck and you don't have access to the self-employed income support scheme, your business isn't one that's going to qualify for a business interruption loan, what next? Well, there are a few things that you could look at. And the main one, obviously, is, are you eligible for benefits? Now, for a lot of people, that is going to potentially represent a big drop in income. And I appreciate that. But what we're looking at right now, I guess, is where can I get some money coming in? If you don't have that steady income, if you don't have that client work, if things are effectively on pause for you with your business, what can you do as of right now to hold some money in or get some money in from somewhere? So there's a great benefits calculator on the entitled2.co.uk website. That's showing, the link is showing on screen now. And just so you know, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again. And as I say, we've got tons of this info on our website as well, which I'll direct you to at the end, so you'll be able to find everything that you need. The Entitled To calculator will walk you through whether or not you're eligible for certain benefits. The main one is obviously universal credit. Now, there's a little bit of a kicker with universal credit for some self-employed people, kind of two elements. One is that if you happen to have more than £16,000 saved up, possibly because you've got that in an account to pay your tax bill, then you're not eligible to apply for universal credit. If you have between £6,000 and £16,000 savings, then you are eligible for universal credit, but the amount you get is going to be deducted. And if you go through the Entitled to calculator, it will explain to you how much would be taken off. Effectively, what they're saying is if you have more than £16,000 in savings, the government expects you to dip into your savings to cover yourself for the next few months. And I know if you're in a situation where you're thinking, but that isn't savings, that's my tax bill. Or if you're a person who's been saving up, for example, for a deposit for a flat, it doesn't feel like savings, right? It's not your rainy day emergency fund. It's hard-earned money that you've been putting towards something. And I know that this is going to feel awful for you. But this is unfortunately the situation that we find ourselves in right now. That again, the government has kind of drawn the lines, and as of right now, they're not willing to relax those upper limits on savings. So again, if you've got more than 16,000 in savings, you're probably not eligible. Between 6,000 and 16,000, yes, potentially eligible, but unfortunately, they're gonna deduct money from you in terms of what you could get. But go through the Entitled to calculator. If you've got less than 6,000 in savings, you should hopefully be eligible for up to the full amount of universal credit that you can get. They've taken out some of the rules that applied, which means that actually for some self-employed people, they're gonna base it on what you actually earn, not on what used to be called the minimum floor. So that is helpful. But yeah, go through the calculator in the first instance to see what you could get. Just in terms of processing times, I know that they had something like 500,000 claims put in the last week. That shows you, it shows you the extent of the problem. This is so many of us that are finding ourselves in this situation. So you're not alone, but it does mean obviously that processing times may be a little slower. It takes on average 5 weeks anyway. But don't panic on that. Get a claim in, and you can get a claim in at the same time that you're waiting to see if you're eligible for the SIS, right? It's not an either or situation. You can put in a claim for universal credit and you can get your grant. So if you think that you might be entitled to universal credit, apply for it, right? It's worth putting that application in now. And the reason it's worth putting the application in is because even though it's a 5-week timetable for them to process it, what will happen is you'll put in your application, then you should get a call back or an email back, and they will ask you if you need them to give you an advanced payment. And that advanced payment is basically them saying, okay, assuming that you get universal credit, here's how much your first payment would be, and we're going to give you that in advance. Now, it has to be paid back, but it just means that you will get that money much, much quicker. And depending on the turnaround times, it can be within a few days. So it's really worth, if you need money now, put in that application, ask for the advance payment. And I can't tell you what the turnaround times are because there's just been such a high volume, but it should be quicker than 5 weeks. And then in terms of other benefits that are available, local councils have been given additional money. They do have the ability to help with rent payments, for example, to help with other one-off payments towards things like food, utility bills. So again, if you're struggling for money now, please get in touch with your local council and see what they have available and see what their criteria is. I appreciate there's a lot to do, and we're going to try and signpost you to things as much as possible. But it definitely is about you sort of going out and saying, okay, I know that I might be eligible for universal credit, so I'm going to apply for that. And then I'm going to approach the council, and then I'm going to speak to my landlord, and then I'm going to speak to utility. So whatever you can do at this point in time to get ahead of it, do try, although bear in mind that there are a lot of people doing the same. So things are really, really busy. Okay, let's talk about what happens if you run your business through a limited company? Because I appreciate that there are a lot of people who are going to be in this situation, and it looks as though we've been slightly left out in the cold. So if you run your business through a limited company and you pay yourself via payroll, so you pay yourself a salary through PAYE, and it's very important, it has to be a salary through PAYE, then you could choose to furlough yourself. Now, you may have heard this furlough word a lot. It feels like we're learning a lot of new words: furlough, self-isolating, social distancing. Furlough is effectively putting an employee on leave, right? So they're no longer working, they're on leave, but they're still employed with your company. So if you are both a director of your own company and an employee, so you have a limited company, but you are paying yourself through PAYE, then you could choose to put yourself on furlough. Now, this is only going to work for you if you've got no work coming in, right? If your business is still functioning and you've still got client work, you're not going to be able to put yourself on furlough because you're still going to need to service those clients or customers. So it's only going to work if you can effectively put yourself on leave. And there was some confusion about whether, if you are, say, the sole director of a company and the sole employee, whether you could furlough yourself. And I believe that it has now been confirmed that you can, and that just performing your director's duties wouldn't take you out of furlough. So you can still be on leave and still perform your director's duties. So it works even if you're the sole director of your company. And why would you furlough yourself? Well, you furlough yourself because if you do that, then you can apply through the job retention scheme. And the job retention scheme is the one that has been set up for companies that have employees to try to keep hold of those employees during the crisis. So it's designed to stop mass redundancies. It's designed so that companies can retain their workforce and pay their workforce whilst this crisis is ongoing. And then once things are better, then that workforce can be taken off furlough and get back to work, and off we go. And so the job retention scheme basically allows you to get reimbursed, again, through HMRC. You can get reimbursed 80% of your salary, up to a maximum of £2,500 a month. Now, very, very important to note that this 80% is only applied against your PAYE salary. So if you are somebody, like a lot of us, who structures their business so they pay minimum salary but higher dividends, then you're only going to get 80% of the PAYE salary amount, not the amount that you take home in dividends. So again, for a lot of people, this is going to represent a much smaller amount of income than they would normally get. But it is an option. Again, if we're thinking about, how do I get some money coming through over the next few months whilst I wait for the business to pick up, then this is a potential way of getting some of that money. Now, of course, it's a reimbursement from HMRC. It's not fully set up yet. We're not sure exactly when that reimbursement will happen. We know that this can be backdated until the 1st of March, but we don't know exactly when the first reimbursement will happen, sometime in April. So that does mean, again, from cash flow situation, that you're going to need to be able to find that 80% of salary to pay yourself whilst you're on furlough until you get it reimbursed. And again, that's where things like the business interruption loans, increasing your overdraft through that scheme, etc., would apply just to give you that money, or keeping hold of those tax payments that we talked about, the VAT or your self-assessment tax, just so you've got some money in the business to be able to cover this whilst you're waiting for HMRC to reimburse it. But that is open to you if you are through a limited company, through PAYE, and you can give yourself effectively that 80% of your salary for the next 3 months. And it's very simple to do. Again, we've got details on the website of how do you actually furlough yourself. Tons and tons and tons of companies are doing it right now. If this is your only way of getting some income, do it. There's no shame in putting your business on pause for a few months. it's specifically designed so that things can keep going, so that you don't have to shut your business down entirely. You just put it on pause, you just put yourself on leave, and then you pick your business back up when things are better. There are some other things that are available to you, which I'm not going to go through in this webinar, but happy to help people if they have specific queries on them. And that's things around business rates. So again, there are schemes where you don't have to pay business rates, or you can pay massively reduced business rates, for example. They apply to particular industries that are very hard hit. So things around hospitality, running restaurants, cafes, things like that. If some of my income during the previous tax year was derived from permanent employment and some from self-employment, will both be considered when it comes to the profit calculation. Okay, so the profit calculation for SIS is calculated on your self-employed profit. So that's the first point. So it's how much money, how much profit did you make from your self-employed business? However, if you also had salary during that time, then that's going to come into the kind of the second part of the calculation, which is how much of my total personal income does the self-employed business profit represent? We're looking at this first bullet, right? So here is how do you calculate what counts as profits? And here, for what counts as profits, we're only looking at what your self-employed business made, not any income that you might have got through salary. But when we look at this second bullet point, which is how much of your income does it represent, there they would look at whatever salary you had and the amount of the self-employed income. So if your self-employed income was, say, 60%, great. But if your salary was 60%, then that wouldn't count. So it's kind of like a two-stage process of calculation on that. Final point I kind of wanted to make, because a lot of people who are working through limited companies or through similar situations have been in a bit of limbo recently because of the planned changes to IR35. And one thing I would say on that, so I know that a lot of bigger companies, for example, have been looking to get rid of their contractors or change their contractors to employees, for example, because of the changes around IR35. If that is you, then the new IR35 rules have been pushed back a year. So it's not changing. So you still have the ability to work as a contractor. So if any of your clients have been saying to you, look, we can't do this arrangement anymore because of IR35, but the work is still available, then definitely go back to those clients and say, look, we can still do this. This arrangement still works. It's fine for another year. That may help some of you. There is a hotline for businesses and self-employed people. There's actually a couple of numbers. It seems to change all the time. So I don't know whether that's that they put on new ones or that they get rid of old ones, but these are the two numbers that have been given out. The lines are open from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. They are incredibly busy at the moment. I wouldn't recommend calling them unless you've got a very comfy seat to sit in, you've got some tea, or you've got like a strong drink of choice. Bear in mind that they are going to be busy. They're going to be swamped. We are all going to have to be a little bit patient on some of this, and I appreciate that that's desperately uncomfortable for those of us who are worried about how we're going to make rent, how we're going to make our mortgage payments. On those points, we've talked mainly about how do I get money in. I haven't talked in this webinar about what happens about payments out. What I would say is, if you are running a business and you have payments out to suppliers, call all of your suppliers, find out what they can do. Everybody is going to be in a similar situation. So I would hope, certainly with bigger companies, that they're going to be willing to give you payment holidays, or they're going to be willing to kind of put a pause on things for now. The other thing is, when it comes to personal costs, mortgage, rent, bills, etc., I've done a separate webinar, which I did last week, on help that is available for you in your personal capacity. Again, I'll show you the link here. We've got a whole page of help that is available at lifetise.com. Corona Money Help. Go there, you'll see there is a full article on what you can do if you're struggling to pay your rent, if you're struggling to pay your mortgage, if you're worried about what life looks like over the next 3 months, what you can do. It includes templates for messages that you can send to your landlord to ask them to give you a rent holiday or reduce your rent. So all of that information is available. Please do have a look. If you aren't sure what to do from here, and I appreciate I've spoken for nearly an hour, it's a ton of information to take in. I've spoken very quickly, I've covered a lot. If you're not sure where you stand and you would like some help being signposted to the support that's available for your particular situation, we are offering free financial health checks. So you can just email us at hello@lifetise.com. As I explained at the beginning, we're not financial advisors, so we can't give you specific advice on what you should do in your particular situation. But what we can do is explain some of this stuff in more detail and make it relevant to your individual situation so that you know where you can go to get help. So that's completely free of charge. It's part of our business to try and help people as much as possible. So, don't be shy. I already had quite a few questions from people this morning before the webinar started, and I was very grateful because it helps me see the things that people are struggling with. It helps us make sure that the information we're providing is genuinely helpful, that we are genuinely answering your questions. So please, if you're worried, if you're struggling, if you're not sure what to do with this information that I've given you, just drop us an email and we'll try and get back to you as quickly as possible, and direct you to kind of the next action points for you and where you can go to find out more.